Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday. It must be Thursday evening with Thomas Hampson. How fun is that? You know, I think I said this last week. I promise I'll only say it one more time. It has been a year. Now, there's two ideas to that. One, it's been a heck of a lot of fun, and tonight shows why it's so fun. We're going to have a wonderful conversation with Antonio Pappano, one of my oldest friends in the business and one of my most admired colleagues in the business. And I'm not saying that just because he hires me. I'm saying that because it's just damn well true. And you can ask any singer in the business. We're going to get into that. But first of all, the bad news. Who would have thought a year ago that we'd be having this conversation in a COVID lockdown again, or still a year later? I don't think anybody, I never thought we would be here. And that's actually where these IDAGIO Live series started. Everything from master classes to presentations to inventing things to somehow give the classical music community continued access to the artists that they admire or artists that they want to get to know, and certainly celebrating the music. And of course, idagio.com, the largest and deepest and most wonderful streaming platform for classical music, is an incredible place for you to come. IDAGIO Live was the first phase of video and interactive communication with our public. And of course, when the Global Concert Hall then started in June, that's when the lid came off. And that has been a big motion in the business in general. And I think it's now, not just because a year later, I think it's clear we're in an analog digital world, meaning we're going to be producing for people coming to concerts as well as people observing or interacting with concerts in a global concert hall kind of way, going into the future. Was never meant to be a stopgap. We are in a new now, and I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities about that. And I'm anxious to talk to Tony about that as well as many other things. I just wanted to say it's been a great year. And in fact, our visitor numbers have gone up. So I guess we'll just keep doing this until somebody buys the mute button and mutes me. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun for me to get to know new people in the classic industry and visit with old friends. And tonight is visiting with really one of my most admired and cherished friends in this business. Seriously, Tony, it's just wonderful to see you. Before we came on air, we were always saying, okay, where's Pam? Where's Andrea? Where's this? Well, I remember we did this. Oh, we got to get back together. We'll save you all of that tonight. We're going to go right into some music business and some coordination. Tony, I've been wanting to talk to you for some time, and I've been keeping track of you. Of course, I keep track of blogs and arts blogs across the industry as much as anybody else, and you've been the name of choice of late. And of course, with LSO, and if I may, LSO, the London Symphony Orchestra, was one of the first enlightened partners that jumped on this global concert hall and the IDAGIO relationship, idagio.com relationship. So we're very, very excited for a lot of reasons, LSO and IDAGIO and you and community. But I mean, I think there's an awful lot of things flying in your life right now. You want to give us the 200-foot balloon overview of what's been going on? I mean, first of all, just a hell of a congratulations. I mean, wow, talk about the lid jumping off.
I've been, well, first of all, let me say hello and thank you, Tom. It's lovely, really lovely for me to see you again and to talk to you. And it means a lot that you invited me here. I've been conducting the LSO since 1996. I met them in Abbey Road Studios, and we recorded La Rondine of Puccini. And I remember they had just come off a patch where they had played a week of contemporary music and very thorny and difficult stuff. And I put the first downbeat down, because for once in this recording process, we started from the beginning. And all of a sudden, the orchestra just took off. It was like it exploded with energy and panache and heart. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to have a relationship with them that has spanned all these years. I've conducted all my symphonic repertoire with them, and I've made several recordings with them. And now I've got to come up with other stuff to them in. But of course, taking over the LSO is something akin to a dream coming true, something that really was a surprise for me because, well, for everybody, I think, everybody thought that Simon Rattle would be at the LSO for a long time. But, the world is changing and many things are going on. Brexit, of course, so this unexpected development, I've been definitely fortunate to have been chosen as his successor. But I know it's going to be a challenging time going forward. Also for me, I'm still at the moment the music director of the orchestra and chorus of the Santa Cecilia, and that little thing called the Royal Opera House. So with the Royal Opera House, I will be continuing through 2024, and we'll be continuing after that because I'm initiating a new production of The Ring. So I'll keep my my contacts very, very strong with them, and with Santa Cecilia. I have just been announced as from 2023, when I stopped becoming the music director. I will be emeritus. I'll have an emeritus position, so I will conduct from time to time with them. These are relationships. It's unusual in this business, Tom. I will have been at Covent Garden for like 21 years when I finish, and with Santa Cecilia 18. That's a lot.
Wow.
If you get years, that's a miracle these days.
However, it was already announced you were stepping down from Covent Garden. I mean, LSO kind of came in on the side. You're not rearranging everything just because of LSO. Cecilia, I think, maybe got on a faster track. Well,
it was, let me tell you what really happened, actually. I was supposed to leave the Royal Opera House in 2020, but then there were problems around the succession, and things didn't work out.
Is there a successor?
Well, at the moment there isn't. No. Yeah. And there was at the time, but let's not get into that. But it didn't work, and so I was asked to stay on, and of course I wasn't going to abandon them in their time of need. I mean, I've worked so hard to make the Opera House a real musical family, and a place where I think you can do very, very good work. I wasn't just going to let that just flounder, right, without somebody in charge. So I decided to come back from the 21 till 23 season, which has now been prolonged till the 24 season. So it's been it's putting together a puzzle, but there are a lot of relationships, I wouldn't say coming to an end, but changing. And that's, for somebody like me, that is so faithful and tries to create these families, if you like. It's emotionally very tough. It's been a tough couple of weeks since this announcement. It's been joyous.
I can imagine that. But I knowing you and knowing some, obviously some of the conversations we've had, I can imagine balancing your endless curiosity, your boundless energy, your desire for new horizons and challenges, at the same time as your obvious loyalty and development of the institution you have caught you up a bit, because I remember talking with you a couple of years ago, and you were saying, I'm not sure what I want to do, I'm not where I'm going to go, I need another something to bite into, and I think somebody else needs to come into the Opera House, not because I'm bad or I want to leave, but it's just organically, so this has been kind of going on for a while, hasn't it?
I've been very lucky in my musical life, in my career, that things have come about organically. Yeah. I mean, I said to you a couple of years ago, I don't exactly know what, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, the door opens to the LSO, an orchestra with which I have an amazing relationship already. It just makes, in many ways, so much sense. Yeah. Push it. I didn't get impatient. I waited it out. And that's kind of what I've done over the years. Things have just worked out somehow. I'm very fortunate. There's no question about it, because some people have to fight to get what they aspire to. But I've been fortunate.
This is an awful question, just because it's going to sound awful. It's a good question. But I mean, I can't believe I have to have this question go across my lips. What has this COVID year been like for you in your various positions? It's the COVID year thing that just makes me kind of sick to my stomach. But go ahead.
Let me talk about London first, because I think that has been the most difficult of the different relationships that I have. I conducted on a Sunday night, one day before the very first lockdown. It happened to be a concert with the LSO. In fact, I was conducting that night a program of British music, ending with the Sixth Symphony of Vaughan Williams, which was being recorded live. It was a very, very special concert somehow, because people knew that something terrible was just about to happen. And we couldn't believe that we were still able to perform, but we were. And everybody was grateful to be in the Barbican, and there was an amazing atmosphere. On 3 days later, I was supposed to conduct Fidelio, the last performance of a run of performances, which was going to go into like 1,000 different cinemas worldwide. That ended up not happening. And since then, London, I think, has really suffered, and the Opera House has suffered a lot. Now, opera is complicated. You're talking about chorus. You're talking about many people in a albeit big space, but challenging. And from a political point of view, I think it was an easy target. We can't. It can't be seen that we do anything to help the big theaters, the West End, all of that, because if everybody's going to suffer, if we're shutting down restaurants and bars and pubs and all that stuff, we've got to shut down everything, even though our rooms are huge and we can handle, the big space and the protocols that are behind health, taking care of all health issues. So I'm quite, shall we say, emotional about that, because I think that our business has been really, really hit way too hard and for no reason.
Awful.
That said, we're the Covent Garden, though we couldn't put on any big productions, we did concerts. We did concerts with young artists. We gave our young artists a chance to really flourish. We did concerts with the orchestra on stage and with the beautiful background of the theater for the cameras. All of this in streaming. We had some wonderful collaborations with singers who are in London. There was some smaller work, cutting edge stuff, very, very well done. So a mixture of things. I did master classes. I have done over 25 more, probably 30 house-to-house sessions where I talk about opera scenes, and I've done virtual duets with different singers. So I think all to say, and especially with the house-to-house thing initiative, which I'm very, very proud of, there was an educational outlet.
Absolutely.
Because in the past, I've done things for the BBC talking about Italian opera mainly, a big program about Italian opera, and then another big, three programs in the first case, and a second group of 4 programs talking about the voice and all the voice categories. Right. And this was a chance for me to talk about music, me at the piano, just me in my music room, and give insight into something I know something about, but without it being sophisticated, just being theatrically true as exactly. I could make. And that outlet for me has been very, very important, because I need to be able to explain, partly because I think that the classical music business, and you know this very well, you do master classes and things, there's a mystique around it that is often viewed as either elitist or something that engenders fear in
Right.
some.
Intimidation.
And partly it's because there's a lack of information. A little bit of information can just open the door for people. And that's what I've been trying to do. It's given me an opportunity to do that. And though I've taken a little breather from that, I will continue when I can, as soon as possible.
Now, this house to house, is that meant as an opera house to opera house kind of communication, or just?
It's the opera house to your house, but actually how I introduce it is welcome to another edition of From Our House to Your House, or in this case, From My House to Your House. And that's
Cool.
That's the count.
No, I've seen a couple of them, and on YouTube, are they all on you? Were these in-house productions of Covent Garden?
Yes, they installed a camera, which is worked from a different location remotely. I put on a microphone, and they have a microphone set up, and I've had it in my house for a year.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's exactly the kind of innovative developments we've had over the years. There's been a lot of that kind of inventiveness that's come in that I think has been very good, and I think it'll go forward. And there's a couple of things I want to pick out on what you just said. Maybe the low-hanging fruit, and maybe the most important, is this notion of education. You know, and education, it's in the English language we say education, but one of my favorite words in the German language is Bildung. And the idea of Bildung, I guess when we mean Bildung in the English language, you know, knowing more tomorrow than we know today, or that stuff which forms how we look at the world, or we perceive ourselves and our place in the world. Whatever we have to get sort of wordy about it. And I love the idea of, you know, Bildung, and then if you're talking about education, you're talking about Ausbildung, and if you're a complete moron, you have Abbildung. But, you know, so much for the German lesson. But it is, I can get quite exercised, and have done a couple times publicly, about this idea of elitism. And it's almost fake news on some level. Of how it gets politically disseminated. The idea that what we do as classical musicians is somehow rarefied, and it may be rarefied in the talent or the effort, but there should be nothing elitist about the pursuance of excellence, one. And two, without the big D democracy as a result of the French and American Revolution at the end of the 18th century, 18th century, you know, and with the release of self-determination and self-alignment and self-expression, we wouldn't have the canon of classical music that we have. You know, I mean, if you look at the two of the giants that you are so familiar with, Beethoven and Verdi, what was their mission in life? It was not elitist. It was about life. It was about politics. It was about the things that happen that affect normal people, or normal people being elevated, ergo Verdi, being elevated to positions of enormous power and presence, and yet being torn apart inside their personal lives for the anguish of non-fulfilling love and whatever these kinds of. There's nothing bloody elitist about any of that. Why is this elitist title? Why? How can we fight this? What is there to be said?
I believe that people who label what we do as elitist need to remember that actually the performer is pouring his or her heart out at the moment, has spent hours and hours preparing for this moment, and is communicating through the language of music. And I don't want to sound airy-fairy here, but is communicating to listeners, to you, and it's a gift that you're receiving. But the work, sometimes the desperation of the musician to achieve excellence, even to get at a middling level, is hard in music. But if the generosity of performance is there, as it is when a rock star gets in front of 100,000 people in a stadium, it's no different. It's the same. There is a generosity from the performers that is absolutely not elitist. It is human and it is powerful, and it's spiritual. I really believe that you can enter the world of somebody who's giving you something that is truly magical, and it's created by a human, but it suggests something that's bigger than us. What's better than that?
And in fact, if I may just jump on that, the generosity of the performer is one thing, but the generosity of the performer is to give everything that you are as a human being up to a character and a dilemma that is a universal in the human story. And you know, the last thing that I want people to be preoccupied with, singing Boca Negra, for instance, which we've done wonderfully together, is Tom Hampson singing Boca Negra. I want them to believe the conundrum, the paradox, the anguish of Boca Negra, as do most of my, and this is the magic of theater that I think you're talking about. I mean, you said it so beautifully in one of the sessions I did watch, and you were saying that you were going on about the voice of that magical moment when the believability, the intent to be believable, and the complete consecration of everything that performer has. It just becomes the sound. It becomes the language of music, and it becomes the voice. And this is transcendental. And I'm quoting you, I'm paraphrasing you, but I just, you know, I literally just put stop and I went, whoa, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Now, you know, I got to tell you, I know an awful lot of conductors, and I've known a lot of conductors, and I can count on one hand those that speak like you. Is that true?
I think, look, the connection that you...
And not just vocally, Tony, I mean musically.
I think the connection that you and I have, the language that you and I speak, is inherently theatrical. I don't mean theatrical in that it's flamboyant. I mean that it has to do with the situations of the conflicts, the millions of situations you and I have both been in the theater, with characters, with moments of incredible, sometimes torpor and desperation, and sometimes the most uplifting joy. You know, these are things that I think change you. And it's I'm not saying that a symphony conductor or a leader singer, I mean, you're a leader singer too, but a concert singer can't experience that. But somehow you and I, we're speaking on a level that's perhaps maybe a higher intensity. Look, you're lucky enough. You're lucky enough that you get to express what you do, what you feel, and what you think with your voice. You know, I mean, I can do that at the piano a more direct way, but often more often than not, I'm just beating the air. You know, and a very conducting by its very nature is a very artificial thing. It's somehow magical in that body language, intensity, contact with the musicians can conjure up a feeling of unity and unity of purpose and direction, which creates a performance. But my God, you do it with your voice and words, and I mean, I'm so jealous.
All right. Okay. Well, we can swap, you know, for a while. You know, so this thing of let's go back a little bit. I mean, your biography is known, but maybe for the IDAGIO public, not so much. I have to admit, until I was well into this industry and well into my career, did I realize you weren't American. How about that? I mean, in fact, I assumed, I did not know that you were not born in America. I had heard somewhere along the line that somebody said, yeah, he was raised in America, which just kind of that aha. And I thought, well, maybe, I knew that your parents, or at least your father, was Italian. But I mean, your genealogy is actually quite extraordinary. I mean, you were born in England, but how did you find yourself in America? How long were you there? How did you go to school? And sort of those first early years, I mean, you were known as the most go-to coach, musical advisor period that there was in New York, and you were just leaving as I was coming and so forth. But I mean, your reputation was already so out there. But I mean, how walk me through that?
I was born in just outside London. My parents had just immigrated from Italy. They were in their 20s, very young. And they were both Italian. They were childhood sweethearts, engaged for 10 years before they got married, and they were married at the age of 23. You know, so
what part of Italy?
In the Campania region, a little town, a village called Castelfranco in Miscano, in the province of Benevento, so inland from Naples, so not the sea. A kind of tribe of people. That were very, very austere and quite forceful, because they pushed back the Romans. They were what we call the Sanniti. The places, the region is called the Sannio, and they pushed back the Romans twice before the Romans really hammered them and took their lands to give to mercenaries that they, owed something to. But there was an incredibly strong people, and this village is a farming town. Very poor. We moved. My parents left and went to London, where my brother and I were born. And when I was 13 years old, they packed up and moved to America.
Okay, so grade school was in England.
Yes, and I had started studying the piano. Or I was 6 years old. My father was doing all kinds of. Was doing so many jobs. My parents always had 2 or 3 jobs, but one of my father's jobs was as a voice teacher. And
right.
And by the time I was 10, I started accompanying his voice students. He would do a half an hour of vocal exercises. Then I would get them and I would play. It could be songs, pop songs of the day, but also Italian art songs, arias, you name it, German lieder even. I learned how to sight read. I learned how to get on with people much older than myself. I learned about the voice, poco a poco, little by little, and
right.
how it all worked, and the breathing, and And
was your brother musical?
My brother is musical, but he's not a musician at all. He's 2 years younger than I am, and he has a big family. I have no children, but he's younger than I am, but he has 4 children and 5 grandchildren. So,
oh my God,
another path,
I'm sure he's glad to loan some of them to you. We have 5 grandchildren now.
Wow.
I have 5 grandchildren. Yeah, a couple in America and 3 over here, and everything. I think the oldest is 11, and the youngest one is 18 months. So we've got quite a spread. We're having fun.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, mazel tov, as we say in Spokane.
Yeah.
So when you were 13, so okay, you've got to run it, and you also have told a wonderful story, very beautiful, in one of these. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you just look up Antonio Pappano on YouTube, you can come across some wonderful interviews and wonderful all the things he's talking about. And a lot of this is on YouTube, and I've looked at it before, but I was just kind of trying to get myself balanced again. And there's a wonderful story where at 5 or 6 you came home with a good note from school, and somehow this was an epiphanal experience where you said, music is my life.
Well, I was I was quite a bit older, actually. I think it was just before we moved to America. I think I was 12. And
okay.
In England they have these these national auditions. They're grade
Right.
1 to 8 in piano or whatever instrument you play, and in theory. And I remember getting the marks for my grade 5, and I passed with distinction and got very high points, and the light went off. Went on.
Wow.
I felt, and I knew that somehow that was a launching pad moment for me, and I.
Were your folks happy about that? Or
Yeah,
did your dad go, "Oh no, musician, no, Ma"?
I'm not sure they understood it, because my father was, though he was a musician, the singing world is very, very different from the instrumental world, and I think none of us knew what was in there. if you told me at the age of 12 that, I was one day going to become a conductor and, presenting shows on the BBC and, becoming the music director of Santa Cecilia and the Royal Opera House and a London Symphony, I would say you're crazy. The whole idea of conducting and, but
so how did that take on? So you go over to America at 13, you change schools. You're, as far as you're concerned, a Brit of Italian heritage, obviously speaking Italian at home in dialect and pure Italian. Any other languages at home? Was French already there? No, it's Italian and English.
I studied French in England already, so I was quite fluent in French by the time I got to America, and I kept going with the French, so I was always up on that too. The German came.
And you moved to New York?
I never moved to New York. I commuted from Connecticut, 1.5 hours by the train on the way there, 1.5 hours on the way back, and I did that every day, And it was
but at 13, you mean, in other words, even at 13 or 14, you were going to school in New York and living in Connecticut?
No. I started that. I got my first job in my early 20s. In New York as a pianist at the New York City Opera.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I met you.
So 13 and 23, I played for my father's voice lessons.
But where'd you go to school?
Well, I finished high school and that was it.
Right. But you in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know all this. Sorry. I think it's fantastic. So you get a job at New York City Opera. Are you already starting to think of a longer trajectory of what your talents could do, or are you just thinking, "Wow, I've got a great job"? And quickly, I think you were like the number one conductor's assistant or assistant conductor and repetiteur, and you had more private work than you knew what to do with. I mean,
I think.
Excuse me. And on top of that, by now, are you thinking I'm an American, or did you feel more Italian or British or American?
Well, I never got rid of my English accent. Americans think I have an English accent.
We just thought you were pretentious, that's all.
Yeah. My brother got rid of his English accent in 2 days. I never got rid of it somehow. I don't know why. But I tell you what started to happen. The more experiences I started to have, the more I wanted to learn, the more I started to see the gaps in my education. Now, of course, if I didn't go to music conservatory, and though I took some courses in a local community college, just English and a little music, I never finished, and there wasn't this concentration on music. I knew, God, I have to learn German. I knew I have to hear the symphonies. There were so many gaps. I have to play chamber music. I tried to do all those things. I was playing the organ in the church. I was playing concerts for instrumentalists at the local college. So I was getting some chamber music experience. I was playing for singers all the time, of course, as I said. I was practicing all the piano pieces, the Chopin and Mozart and Brahms and Bach and all that. But it was such a peripatetic life. There wasn't a lot of focus. It was everything. But you know what? That's how my life kept going. I've been doing sort of everything all the time. That's what's very interesting about this COVID period, because all of a sudden, forced upon me has been a break of some kind, stop.
Exactly.
And I think that for all of us, it's been that way.
You know what I called it literally at this time last year. I said, I'm in my COVID sabbatical, and I'm willing to dedicate 2 evenings of my life to IDAGIO and visiting with people. But it has been kind of a COVID sabbatical. I love how you've dovetailed this or projected this right into the current time. I've got some other questions, and I'm asking questions. I know people are really curious for people of your stature and of your experience and so forth. But coming into this COVID time, what is that? Since you referenced that and parked us after this enormous voracious appetite, Has it been a study time? I mean, you've mentioned a lot of things that have gone on at Covent Garden, so you've been pretty busy. I've often joke and say I'm as busy as ever. I just happen to be revenue free.
I've done most of my conducting, and I've done quite a lot of conducting this past year in Italy. Why? Well, because in Italy, certainly in Rome, where I have my wonderful Santa Cecilia Orchestra, the weather gets quite nice starting around now, around April, May. And so, believe it or not, I did a series of outdoor concerts. I did the whole Beethoven symphonic cycle.
Wow.
I did 7 or 8 other programs outdoors. So, quite amazing. And
how many people? Did a lot of people come?
1,000 each concert. And that's pretty good at that time when,
Absolutely.
things were down. So we were very lucky. And then we were able to open the season in Rome. And there also we had 1,000 in, I managed to do 3 programs before they shut us down really for quite a while, before we could start streaming.
Right.
Thing that we're all doing now, like what we're doing now, but of concerts. So I had a tremendous amount of activity with my orchestra. And during this streaming time, and the big problem, Tom, as you know, has been, what do you do with the chorus? What can you do? And I mean, in the last few months, I've done both Elijah and the Brahms Requiem. And I won't say that those experiences were easy. And in fact, they were fraught with difficulties because of the distance of the chorus from me and the distance between each member. So to get it together from a technical point of view, so that a listener can say, wow, that's not a shambles, was already something. But we did it. So it meant something very, very important to me, to help these people, these wonderful singers who are at home, and been punished to the greatest degree. Look at all the opera choruses, but most choruses all over the world have been sitting at home doing nothing, maybe doing something online, these collages, musical collages. But so it was very important to me, even with a tremendous effort, to try to involve the chorus. And that's been very, very gratifying. And very, very important for the institution, because it means we're in it all together. This is a tough time, right. And I think what's very important about this time is which institutions are going to survive. The institutions that have been working as a team to survive, who have been working with their donors, with their sponsors, with each part of the house to try and stimulate some kind of activity to stay in contact with audience members, with people who love us, frankly, who love what we do and want to follow it, but don't have the possibility to congregate in the halls, and do you
have you, if I remember correctly, there was quite, Sir Simon was extremely vocal. And I think there was a letter that circulated last fall of rather dire proportions of the arts and the funding and the lack of and the ambivalence and the destruction going on in England, which of course could have been read from any country. Were you part of? Was it a kind of a movement or a global statement? I think Mark Elder was on that. Was there some sort of document?
Listen, there was a letter from the two of them.
Right.
I am, neither of them works for an institution like the Royal Opera House, which though it doesn't get a lot of money from the government, when you compare it to opera houses in Paris, Vienna, Munich, for example, fraction. But to most people, the sum is quite considerable. So I felt that whatever I do, to speak out, I will do it in tandem with the priorities of the opera house, politically speaking. What I've done Recently, however, in the last couple of months, I've been speaking out much more, and I think that's been very, very important, because I've had a chance to see. I get on an airplane, it's full of people, packed, and then I go into a hall, we do a concert, and there's nobody there.
Yeah,
You know,
riddle me that.
and
Exactly. You go through all this machination. And by the way, all these border controls if you're in a plane, but if you drive, nobody's ever stopped me at a border. I was just in Italy, in Firenze for 5 weeks and came back and forth here. And I've gone from Austria and so on, or the train, I mean, it's very illogical what's going on. And also, I think more to the point, it has been proven that the places where music takes place in these large halls and concert halls and so on are that no one's being infected. Now, obviously, the crush bar is gone, and there's other stipulations which can handle it. But the idea of just cutting it, just this lowest common denominator execution, doesn't make any sense. And then on top of that, and we might as well cut to the chase here, there is this, whatever you want to call it, pay for play community, or the what's the actual word we call it? We call it the gig economy. That people who are paid for what they do that night, and their concerts or opera has been canceled for no fault of theirs, have not across the world been paid anything. Nothing. Zero. In America, there's 1,200 orchestras that are silent. Go ahead.
Yeah, at the Opera House, we initiated a policy where all the contracts that were cancelled for the singers and production people, we paid 20% to the singers. So that's something. We made a gesture.
Absolutely.
It's not overwhelming, but I think it was looked upon really very, very kindly.
Is the I don't want to, and I appreciate your diplomatic answer, and I'm not trying to find, I'm not Norman Lebrecht. I'm not trying to, God bless him, but oh, Norman, don't get angry. I'm just kidding. The last conversation I had with Norman, by the way, is that I got invited to leave Israel when this whole thing hit. I was going downstairs from the famous Hilton to get in a car to go to general rehearsal of Schubert orchestrated songs, and Avi called the general manager and said, they decided at 12 o'clock last night that anybody coming from Switzerland or Austria or whatever else had to either go into a 10-day quarantine or leave the country immediately. What do you want to do? And I said, well, gee, let me think about that real quick. I'll give you a call from the airport. And so anyway, but then we had to announce that. So there was an announcement that Mr. Hampson and Norman got a hold of it, and it sounded it could have been read to that I had COVID, that I'd gotten sick, and ergo had to leave and so forth. So I just called him up, which I shocked him, and I said, "Can you do me a favor? Actually, I don't have COVID. This is a situation. The wording is just a bit funky. Would you mind changing the title? Just, I get, and whatever it was you want to know." And he did. So thank you very much, Norman. I've always gotten along with him. What I mean is, and I'm not trying to bore in on you here, but since there is still an international conversation about the gig economy, about the arts in general, about, as economies are opening up, what I've asked all along is, at what point in the opening up and assessing the absolute necessities of human life do you actually get back to the arts and humanities, much less the performing arts, as a kind of life's blood or a life's nourishment? How long is that conversation going to go on? So from where you sit, has this conversation become a serious, valid conversation in England? And since you sit in a very interesting position between the heart of Europe and Italy being one of the first that just got the shit kicked out of it from the COVID pandemic, excuse my French, do you see differences in how the different countries are handling it? Do you think we're having the conversation we should have about the arts? A lot of questions in there, Tony. You can do what you want. You know me.
Yeah. I think, look, we have a fundamental problem with the arts in that there seems to be a problem around education in the schools. There's not enough of it, and it seems that there only the elite schools can somehow manage to create the experiences for the young people that we think certainly I think are necessary for the growth and development of the brain and the whole heart and soul of every young person. I'm not only talking about classical music. I'm talking about all the arts. I mean,
absolutely, music as a language.
Exactly. And I think kids need to also, they need to know about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, as well as Bach and Mozart and Beethoven. So there's that, which is a problem, and it's a problem that continues, because it seems that even the heavy hitters who speak out can't seem to get through to a meaningful enough degree to change policy. Therefore, it's up to the arts institutions themselves to try to create these wonderful programs, and they do for young people. But of course, if it's coming from these institutions, it's going to be a relatively small number of people that are going to be affected or infected positively.
Yeah.
Going forward, I believe that there's going to be such a thirst from the public to congregate, to share experiences in whatever arts corner of the arts world you want to name. I think there's going to be an explosion. So I think that's going to be positive. I believe that. There might be some hesitancy at the beginning, but I even don't think so. England, I can speak about, of course, because the vaccine rollout has been so positive. It looks like that this date of May 17th, when everything is supposed to, when the theatre is going to open up, certainly Covent Garden it looks like it's going to hold. That's a miracle, because we've had one after another, but 92% drop in cases. This is amazing. So in Italy, it's going to be, we've continued to work here in Rome. We have continued to do streaming, but has it had any influence on how important the arts are in the world? I don't know, Tom, to answer your question honestly. My hope is that we realize that people can go crazy sitting home, can be affected mentally, extremely detrimentally. And I think certainly music is something that has a power to heal, to nourish, and if that is indeed the case, that's something that should accompany us through life. And it should be something that governments, that it's not some kind of highfalutin idea that, that is all poetry and all, new age. It's a basic requirement.
I think to me, the arts, they enliven one's and students' perception of a larger dialogue of what life is about, and that other people have already thought the things that they're thinking, and so forth and so on. There is no empirical evidence that is not for the arts in the school or the music in school. What I feel politically happens very often is that when people say, oh, we should have music instruction in the school, the first thing we hear is, yeah, but what if they don't want to be a musician? Well, that just misses the point completely and utterly. And you cannot study music, you as well. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot study music, any part of music, without studying history, without studying literature, without studying biography of lives lived, sometimes very sadly, but yet geniusly at the same time. And there's all sorts of scales of humanity within this great story that enlivens the sense of empathy, of compassion, of camaraderie, of societal place, if you will. I mean, we have to, as human beings, understand or believe at different points in our lives, why am I here? What am I doing? It's like what Joseph Campbell, I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan. You must have known Joseph Campbell or known of him in America.
Sure.
And this man was dying, a brilliant anthropologist and philosopher. And he did that quite a few series with Bill Moyer. And I remember Bill Moyer looking at him. It was a very sad, one of his last, he was dying of cancer. And he was coughing a lot, and you could hear, it was really sad. And he said, so Bill, he said, so Joe, they were Joe and Bill at that time. He said, so at the end of the day, after everything you've told and everything you've said, what do you want people to remember? What do you want them to think? And without even, in his reflective way, and he said, it's not so much as I've studied and I've shown, it's not so much the question of the meaning of life. It seems to me that all of these masks of God and all these things that we're looking at is about the meaning in life.
And the
I'll never forget.
Power of myth.
Exactly. And I get goosebumps when if he never said anything his entire life except that. I'll never forget that. I just said, tears rolling down my face. Oh my God. But isn't that I wish we could get the political dialogue to that. But okay, what about I don't want to keep you. I promised you an hour. I do want to ask you. First of all, the most important question. I wanted to play golf. You wanted to play soccer.
Sure. When I was a kid growing up in London, I certainly wanted to play football. I was pretty good too, and the idea of practicing and was not something that really appealed to me.
Practicing what? Piano or soccer?
No,
or
the
football?
piano. But when you get dumped by a girlfriend, and you go into that, you go in you're in despair, and what are you going to do? You start practicing. You start practicing the piano and bury all your feelings in that, and I haven't stopped since.
I love it. All right, next question. So as you started, when you were in the Opera House way back in the beginning in New York, did you go from New York to Brussels?
No, what I did was I met some people in New York City Opera, a couple actually, Robert Hale, who you know, and
sure.
Inga Nielsen, his wife, who is now deceased, right. And they said, you have to come to Europe and you have to conduct. You play the piano like a conductor. I said, what are you talking about? And in fact, they got me auditions over in Europe, and I went to, and I had already started getting back to Europe occasionally.
Right.
Yeah, I was playing the piano at the Liceo Opera House in Barcelona as a coach. I had met the chorus master of the time, the wonderful Romano Gandolfi. He came to America to conduct the Verdi Requiem in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I was his assistant, and I translated for him, and I did everything, and I played the piano, and he said, "You've got to come to Barcelona," and so I went, and I.
Good God, do you speak Spanish as well?
Well, I do speak a little bit, yeah, actually, and then at the same time I got a job at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. While I was in Barcelona, these were not year-round, because those I would do a few months there and a few months there. And then while I was in Barcelona, I got a call to go to do an audition in Frankfurt at the opera. And I wanted to learn German. This was very important for me. And I went to Frankfurt and to Munich, and the Frankfurt Opera, they gave me such an interesting audition and they offered me a job, and I took it. And so I was dancing between Frankfurt Opera, Chicago Lyric Opera, and Barcelona. It was a wonderful existence.
Wow.
It was in
nice dance.
While I was in Frankfurt, it was a very interesting, because if you look at those three opera houses, in Frankfurt, I was introduced to all the new staging idea, the regie and all this, very avant-garde stuff. In Barcelona, I played for all the big singers, all of them, from Carreras to Mirella Freni to Gwyneth Jones to Eva Martin to you name it.
Montserrat Caballé.
I coached Montserrat Caballé in her house. Strauss, the Marshall, and Ariadne. So God. So that was fantastic to hear these sounds. Alfredo Kraus. Can you imagine hearing Alfredo Kraus and Mirella Freni singing the garden scene in Faust? I mean, I heard those sounds I will never forget in my life, ever.
I mean, I must say at the beginning, I got to sing with these guys. I mean, I got to actually, as a young man, be on stage with them, and I remember singing Valentin to Mirella Freni's, Marguerite, and Sois maudite. It's not true. I love you. I adore you. I'm sorry. Sois maudite. I don't mean it. Please don't take. I'm acting. I love you. She just laughed and carried on. She was amazing, and of course, Alfredo Kraus, I think, is one of the most tragically neglected great singers of the last 60 years, and his life at the end, and his wife. Anyway, go ahead. Yes, you were just cutting your teeth on gold.
Yeah, and in Chicago, I met the likes of Placido, and it was a combination of how opera is done in America with big stars and big conductors came through, and wonderful productions. It was a wonderful time during the artist Krenik years. She ran the company. It's a fabulous time. But while I was in Frankfurt, I got called to do auditions for Bayreuth, for Daniel Barenboim. The auditions happened to take place in Berlin. This was for a new Ring production. And anyway, he poached me. And he took me, and I worked with Daniel for 6 years, really, from carrying his books to playing rehearsals, to coaching all the singers and really, doing everything. That was, of course, a development to be in Bayreuth, that I heard all that new music for my ears, and Tristan and Parsifal and the Ring. This was a huge opportunity.
But by now you're clearly thinking conducting is where this may all go.
Still not.
Really?
Because although I had in the early 80s, some conducting opportunities, I started working with Daniel in the mid 80s, like 86, 87. And in 1990, I believe it was, he was going to take me as his first assistant to work in Paris at the new Bastille Opera.
Right.
When that all fell apart, because there was a political explosion there, and it just huge. It was a real scandal at the time. All of a sudden, I didn't have a job anymore, and I was free, and that's when my career started. All of a sudden, I had all this time on my hands, and I started getting opportunities. It was very strange and very, again, it was somehow organic. Something falls away here and a door opens there.
So what was the first time you walked into a pit or on a stage as a conductor and thought, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to go. Was there kind of a pivotal moment? Yes.
It was, I'll tell you exactly when it was, when I went to the first stage and piano rehearsal of La Bohème. This is 1987. So prior to this 1990 thing, where I decided I want to conduct regularly and maybe give up being an assistant. In 1987, I conducted my first La Bohème at the Norwegian Opera. And I had been suggested by Inga Nielsen at the time. And, I was totally unknown. And I went into that rehearsal, and from the first second, I started telling everybody how to sing, how to act, how to pronounce. I worked with the piano. I just took over. And all of a sudden, everything that I had done for all the years of watching other people do this, it just came out of me like a flood. And I said, here it is. This is what I can do. And it was always tied up with the visual aspect. It was not just about music. It was always about how somebody looks when they sing. How are they thinking when they're singing? Are they really talking to the other person?
Okay, we should do volume 2, but this begs my question, and it's not about thinking finger wagging or beating on things, but there must have been times, because of how you music, and I know you as a musician, I know you as a conductor, I've worked with you, I love you, I've learned from you, and so forth. You know, what do you do with a producer, and you're sitting there going, no, that's not going to work, that shouldn't happen. Are you able to, what is the question? I mean, you become a very powerful music director, and you run your own opera house. But were there times where you were on a production where you thought this is just not going to go right? And have you been able to work then with a producer about that, or the regisseur, or have you always been able to choose the regisseurs you were going to go and try and learn from, or learn with, or work with?
I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some of the great directors, and I've done some amazing productions in my life. I've somehow always managed to create a situation where by the time we're in the middle of the process, the stage director is giving musical directions to the singers, and I'm giving stage directions to the singers.
I've been there. It's true. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not exaggerating. It's absolutely wonderfully true.
But I have this close relationship with stage directors because I always let them try what they want to achieve.
Right.
And if by the 7th or 8th time something is really not working, then I say, we've got to find a solution for this, you know. And I try to. I'm not someone who becomes very autocratic, and just comes down. I'm somehow very collaborative in that way, or I get very quiet and people know that something is wrong.
I've been there, done that too, with you. But by the way, and I really don't want to keep you. I've got three more questions. Just follow up on this, and that is that we've often talked about young singers and their disciplines today and the training that they go through and getting them on stage. And I'm as passionate as you are about not giving back, but in fact passing it on. That's what we do. But that's interesting because I've said this to young singers. Well, what do you do when a regisseur wants you to blah blah blah? And I said, try it. Try it 2 times, try it 3 times. And at some point, maybe you're just going to sit there and have a big heavy sigh and say, I can't do it. I don't know how to do that. What I feel is maybe I should try it this way, or can I try this? I think you'll have yourself in a conversation that is more pleasant than if they say, oh, I want you to dance on a table, and you say, what bullshit. Don't go there. Try it. Try whatever is, and that's what rehearsals are for. Explore the stuff that you don't want to have happen. Give yourself a parameter of possibility. That's really the usefulness of rehearsals, in my opinion. But anyway, what do you think? I mean, is this, you work a lot with young singers. There's a couple of things I've heard you be slightly frustrated with this next generation of singers, that they are either not getting as good a training as they want, or their personal discipline to what they need to be able to do to move forward has demonstrably changed. And I'm saying that, but I'm asking you.
I think I find myself always reminding the singers, what are you saying? Why are you saying it? But also, because of my background, with my father, I do make technical commentary. And sometimes I think singers don't realize that the art of bel canto is a science also. There are certain physiological things that happen in your throat. If you don't do this, you can't do that. That's right. Very simple, Tom, but you know exactly what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you mean. It's well said.
Yeah, and I think that I get impatient when people just take that. Yeah, oh yeah, sometimes I might do it sometimes, or I forget. You've got to be very, very focused on that, because the number of singers who get to the age of 33, 34, and your voice says, hello, can you sing? Do you know how to sing? If you know how to sing, I'll accompany you into your 60s. If you don't know how to sing, your career is over in 3 years.
That's right.
And it happens often, because I think that it's not a question of divorcing the technique from the expression. I don't believe in that. But there's a beauty around how the throat works, and it is different for every voice. But there are certain principles involved.
Absolutely.
Words, the passaggio, and all that stuff that every singer has to find for himself. But if you don't deal with it, it's going to trip you up at some point. It is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All
right. You've got 2 albums coming out. What are they?
Yeah. Well, I've got they're 2 very exciting albums and very contrasting. With Santa Cecilia, a Strauss album, Ein Heldenleben of Strauss, the big autobiographical tone poem, and coupled with the Burlesque, a piece for piano and orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
Not often, with a wonderful French pianist, Bertrand Chamayou.
I've heard of it.
That's one of classics, and it's coming out very soon. And on LSO Live, believe it or not, the 2 Vaughan Williams symphonies, 4 and 6, 2 almost, I would say, brother and sister pieces infected with the thoughts of war and the struggle of society during these very turbulent times. So pieces also timely for now. And it's well, I had no idea about this LSO thing happening to me, but isn't it somehow wonderful? Isn't life strange and wonderful sometimes? Here we have my future orchestra and my now orchestra, and there's 2 records coming out,
Are you a Vaughan Williams passionate guy? I am. I'm crazy about Vaughan Williams.
I didn't know I was a passionate Vaughan Williams guy, but I have become. It's not easy music, and there's a cliche around it that it's pastoral countryside music. But these pieces are tough and desperate and emotional. You wouldn't think that of coming from an Englishman, but they are incredibly strong.
Ralph Vaughan Williams had the greatest quote about Walt Whitman. He said, because his first symphony, the Walt Whitman Symphony, is a beautiful piece. When you get to it, give me a call. Thank you. It's just the C symphony is wonderful. But he said, Ralph Vaughan Williams said, Walt Whitman allows an agnostic to be a good person. I think that's a fantastic quote. So, just in the closing 2 seconds, and I've kept you over. I'm sorry. I apologize. I know you're getting back to studying and all that wonderful stuff you're doing. But what can you tell us about? Have you started to plan with the LSO? Have you had conversations, or is the jar completely wide open, or so? What cycle are you going to do, or what do you think? Or do they just want a bouquet?
The jar is wide open. I don't conduct the orchestra until June 2022, a time when I won't yet be the music director designate. But I'm just thinking. I'm thinking a lot about how to program going forward. But I'm asking myself a lot of questions, and hopefully I can come up with some good answers.
Have you got a bucket list?
Oh,
pieces
sure.
of music and operas? Is there stuff you haven't done that you'd like to do? Or do again better?
I find I want to return to certain things. But London is a very active place. There are 2 opera houses just in London alone. Plus there's Glyndebourne. Then there's all the country home opera houses. So operas get done quite a bit, so that to choose and choose the right one at the right time that somebody else is not doing is trickier than you might think.
No, I can well imagine. Tony, it's wonderful to get caught up, and thank you for letting me ask you these questions that I know our public is also interested in, and it's great. I hope to see you, as we say, live soon. In whatever capacity, if nothing else, just a good glass of wine with Pam and Andrea. But take care of yourself and never change. Please never change. You're just absolutely wonderful.
Tom, you're a real star, and this is what you're doing is amazing. Thanks for taking this on. I mean, thanks for inviting me, of course, but that you've been doing this for a year. Bravo to you.
But you reminded me. You did this whole series on the Pines of Rome, which was fantastic.
And Aida, I did.
And Aida.
Yeah.
For IDAGIO. You can still see it, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. All the IDAGIO Live over the last year are available on the IDAGIO Live YouTube channel, or we can find out if you write. But I'm quite sure that's it's all there, but it's expanded and so forth. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. We've gone over time. Oh, what a surprise. But I think it was well worth it. And Tony, hang on just a minute, but we say goodnight to everyone. Thank you very much. See you next week. And I never say who's coming next week because it'll somehow jinx it. But it's always fun to see you and to have